Hello, sisters. Okay, I'm for real. Every time it goes live, it's like the screen is kind of like clouded, and then the picture becomes clear, and then it's like you've been live for like 6 seconds, and it's like, what? I don't know why it always does that. I don't know what that's about. Okay, anyway, so hello, how's your day going? I've had a super busy day. I sat down, and then I was kind of falling asleep. I think purely because I was like stationary for the first time today. Um, yeah. All right, so we're gonna go through some of this. I think that the way the essay was communicated was really clear and really easy to understand. But for me, the essay, I feel like every two paragraphs, I read something that I was like, oh my god, like big brain moment. I was like, this makes me think of so many things that connect to it. This makes me re-understand this problem I already have. This makes me like have a different understanding of a concept of already kind of thought I understood. Like every couple of paragraphs, I was like having all of these kind of connections. And so to me, I think that I will actually really appreciate the essay the second time I read it. Uh, so all that to say, like we're gonna go through it, but I feel like if I was to go through it again in like a month, I would have different things to say about it. All right. Oh, there's a bunch of like notes at the end. So like let's read the notes. This is a reference to number 1. Should we find where number 1 is? Let's go look back. Okay, maybe let's not. I'm just gonna read the note. This essay was published in Theoretical Perspectives on Sexual Difference, edited by Deborah L. Rode, the New Haven, Connecticut, Yale University Press, 1990. An earlier version of it was delivered as an invited paper to the program of the Central Division of the American Philosophical Association, May 1st, 1987, and the earliest work on it was supported by the Center for the Study of Women in Society at the University of Oregon, where I was visiting scholar in 1984 to 1985. I am indebted at many points to conversations with Carolyn Schaefer and to comments made by many women of the various occasions over the last 5 years, which I have given talks in which I was working out various aspects of these thoughts. Note 2. Deborah Rhodes suggested that what I was saying here is simply that women's experience appears to be quote-unquote different. But in the current lingo influenced by French, quote-unquote difference is an abstract and generic term. What I am referring to here is two quite specific things. That which is flat out unintelligible, which is not quite what the French following Derrida and in the shadow of Lacan meant by difference, and that which is specifically and concretely different, in that it is abnormal in the negatively charged sense of that concept. And I'm talking here about the experience of women. We do not experience ourselves under the conceptual net of patriarchal forms as abstractly and semantically different, but as unintelligible or abnormal. So also do men commonly experience women. This is the third note. The use here of we, our, feminist theories, and feminist theory is and will remain problematic. I know I am not the only one engaged in the pilgrimage described here, but I could not and would not pretend to say who else this speaks for. But those who do not identify with this we, I think the essay can be read as a record of what some women have been called them who have called themselves feminists and theorists have thought and done. Okay, this note is like kind of the perfect example of the essay, right? Because she's like, let's not overgeneralize and let's not be too specific. Like, I think the essay, in like very general terms, basically was like, let's keep to the spirit of things rather than to like the letter of things. Part of the reason I really hate social media and that I keep like every 6 months I take like an 8-month break or whatever, like you guys know, for those of you who've been around a while, you see that I have like seasons, right? I have like a season of being on social media, then I have a season of being off social media. It's about half a year on, half a year off. Part of the reason I really, really hate it is that things become rhetorical. And this essay talking about pattern recognition, like, you see women talking about, for example, experiences of domestic violence. And all it takes is one woman to say that hasn't happened to me, and everybody says, well, then the pattern that's the initial woman was trying to point out obviously has no merit, or the fact that you're bringing it up is like malicious or something. Like, people are so fucking literal. I mean, and not people, because I don't really care what the men have to think. Women can be so literal and logical and linear that, like, what she's talking about, like the metaphor of, like, or the pattern that is impacting them and the women around them. Like, they can't see the forest for the trees, basically. So she's pointing that out here. She's like, someone is going to read this essay and be like, when you're trying to explain like what feminists are doing, like, how dare you include these women or exclude these women, or say that you apply to this group or something. And it's like, she's trying to make like a general statement without generalizing. So, like, let's not nitpick every single freaking word. Also, okay, she uses the term postmodern like twice in the whole essay. But it's very clear to me that this essay basically is like the warning, postmodernism is coming. Like, because she points out towards the end, like, that voice. So the way I kept interpreting the term voice when she used it was tone. And I know that that's probably removing some of the nuance that she intended when she chose the word voice. Because, like, given the context that she kept mentioning consciousness raising, like, I'm certain that she meant in person, face to face, like intentional, pre-planned, like, consciousness raising. Like, I think most of the consciousness raising I've experienced in my life has been like kind of accidental, kind of like, and almost all of it's been on social media. The vast majority of it has been on social media. So it's in like small, closed, like Facebook group chats or WhatsApp groups or something like that. And I think when she used the term voice here, it means something very specific to her that I think I can't totally understand, because I don't have that experience to draw upon, which is kind of symbolic of the essay, that it can mean something to me, even if it's not directly my experience. But yeah, I like this. She brings this up. She's like, language is not that important. I think she even goes so far to say language actually doesn't matter. What matters is voice. Well, how I understood that was like tone is what matters. And to a broader extent, the spirit of it is what matters. So I think about this a lot when I'm getting frustrated with the rhetorical quality of social media, like feminist discussions. Like, think of any discourse. Think about separatist discourse, or think about like bisexual discourse. There's like a handful of phrases you can, like, off the top of your head, you know those phrases, and you know if you're going to like scroll through a thread about that on any social media platform, you're going to see those phrases come up. And it's like, when she talks about voice and she talks about language, she's talking about, let me restart that phrase. When she was describing what consciousness raising is, she's like, you start off by talking about an experience or a thought or a feeling, and then you take it at face value and you run with it in a way that you think is kind of inappropriate, but this is the place and the time to do it anyway. And the purpose of doing that is that it leads you to new ways of thinking and new ways of understanding and new ways of connecting. So the antithesis of that is to hear a phrase, hear a thought, hear a feeling, and have a knee-jerk reaction of this is the response. Because it's not leading you to new ways of thinking, new ways of understanding, new ways of feeling, new ways of connecting, whatever. Now, it's not to say that everything in your life needs to be a consciousness-raising effort, obviously. But it was just, there are so many points in the essay where I would read something and I would think, oh, like, this is like what she was talking about like before. I was like, it made it make so much sense to me. So going on more with this, the language and spirit of the thing concept, you look at postmodernism. I mean, a friend of mine sent me this horrific piece of academic bullshit, which I may or may not do on a live stream, like reading and reacting to it, but truly horrific piece of garbage. And a lot of it has like this dumb fucking academic, what did she call it in here? Not academic intelligentsia. It was like, here, Euro linguistic fashion of the Euro-American intelligentsia. It has all this bullshit in it. And it's like, I'm not the first one to say this. I know this is not new. It's like you need to have known what queer theory is and known what social justice is and also know a lot of porn shit to know what the fuck the language of it. You can't even get into what is the spirit of it, what is the tone of it. You don't even fucking know what they're saying in the first place. After you've decoded the fucking language, then you can try to step back and say, okay, what's the tone of this passage? What is like the goal that they're trying to communicate to us with all this bullshit? And I like that she brought this up because, like, specifically, I love a lot of language that she uses. She, like, phallocratic, like, that's a great term that I'm pretty sure she coined. I mean, I've never seen anybody else use it, although there definitely is some stuff that she uses that I know she got from Mary Daly that I don't recognize it because I haven't read enough Mary Daly. Anyway, but she usually, like, sources. Like, I know she was using, in the introduction of this, she used something from Julia Penelope, and she, like, was like, no, Julia Penelope, this term. Anyway, so she does create language, but every time she creates language, I think it's intelligible. Obviously, I'm like pretty well read, even if not like formally educated. So I know that like my standard for what is like easily intelligible is not universal. Especially because like, I mean, technically my French is my first language, but like, technically like I've spent like my whole life speaking English, reading in English. But yeah. So she does create language to describe specific things that, as she's would say, I'm sure, are meant to give legitimacy to the female perspective in a patriarchal world. She doesn't do this to kind of alienate women to the point that they can't understand what she's saying. She doesn't do this to, like, there's no, like, egoism behind it, I guess is my point. When she does this, she's trying to, like, give other women tools to talk about things. At least that's how I interpret it. And when postmodernism creates stupid fucking language for shit, they're not trying to make things more accessible and more easily understandable and to give you terms to express new concepts more easily. Because, like, it's crazy. Talking to academic friends of mine, right? You will read a phrase or they'll text me a phrase, but like, you see this? And I'm like, like they could send me a paragraph and I'll literally be able to summarize the paragraph in like 5 words. And it's like, so you're not doing this to make things easier. You're not doing this to give a more nuanced, new communication. Like, you're doing this to like puff yourself up that you're smart. And when you look at that and you observe that, and then you go back to like her kind of question of like, what is the voice? What is the tone? What is the spirit of the thing? To me, the spirit of the thing is not how do we connect with people? How do we make things accessible to each other? How do we, through the easily understood communication of our experiences, interpret the similarities and differences between each other? When I see this stupid postmodern bullshit language, I think, oh, you're trying to look smart and make it so other people cannot communicate with you unless they are on the same stupid fucking academic level as you. So you are actually preventing understanding and connection. Like, it's like so fucking arrogant and stupid. And she uses the term arrogant I once in this essay. Arrogant I is a reference to one of her older essays, which is on the channel. I encourage you to go. I don't remember which essay it's in. It's like something, the lovers in and out of harm's way, beyond love, or something like that is the name of the essay. But she talks about the arrogant I, like the arrogant perceiver, and she basically describes it a little bit in this essay where she's like, they don't say the thing because they're observing the truth and trying to communicate to you what they think the truth is. The arrogant I, aka the man, is self-centered and has like a god complex. So he says a thing, and then because he interprets the world to be that way, he like incidentally kind of makes the world be that way. And because the men around him generally are trying to like prop up his ego because they view it as an extension of their own ego and their own like collective authority, they will also generally perceive things to be the way that he said it was and go out of their way to make that the way it is. And so that they're basically like kind of creating things as they go along because they have the authority to do so. And they have the authority to do so unquestioned, right? So when I see this postmodern bullshit with the stupid fucking postmodern language that nobody can understand, like I could understand it if I sat down and decoded it, but why the fuck would I spend my time doing that? Every time I do it, I'm like, so they're just trying to say something really basic with stupid fucking language. To me, it's kind of like the academic embodiment of the arrogant I, of the arrogant perceiver. Like, it's just so fucking patriarchal. Like, yeah, anyway. Okay, let's go back to the beginning of the essay. So we talked about language, we talked about voice. Oh, I'm just going to say one last thing. To me, tone is like the most important thing. Or in this case, because she's using the term voice, is the most important thing. Sorry, I'm tired. I don't know where I was going to go with that. Tone and voice are the most important thing. If a woman doesn't have a back catalog of feminist knowledge, like, and I mean feminist knowledge in terms of like literature or something, if a woman doesn't have like a repertoire of consciousness raising conversations that she can like draw, because I have that now, where if I'm trying to talk about something, I'm trying to make a connection with the woman, I can think of other connections I've made with women, I can think of other epiphanies I've had with women, and I can try to like drop into the conversation or like bring it up. Like, if a woman doesn't have all these things, she doesn't have all these kind of like woman-centered resources to call upon, and she doesn't have the vocabulary that comes from like a feminist self-education. What she does have is like her spirit and her tone and her intention, and I think that's like the most important part. I just feel like almost all the time online that's completely fucking lost, and part of it is that when you see things in type you don't get tone, right? Yeah, let's not get into like age stuff because part of it is like who grew up online and who didn't, but it like saddens me how many women come to online spaces to talk to women about feminism, and their tone is disregarded because they don't have like XYZ things to say, they don't have XYZ knowledge to present, and it's like those things don't actually fucking matter. Yeah. All right, let's go back to the beginning of the essay. How long have we been doing this? 18 minutes. Okay, I'm ending this in 10 minutes, no matter what. I know I always say that and then I don't do it, but like for real, because I'm so fucking tired and I have to work still from like, I have to get to my next job at 4 p.m. I need to shower and stuff. Okay. Oh my gosh, okay. The first paragraph of this essay. She's talking about like, imagine some random person saw an elephant in one place in one spot not moving, and they wrote an accounting of their observations, and then they were like, this is all you need to know about elephants. And she is like, this is what like men's perception of the world is. It's like one dude stood in one spot looking at one thing and being like, that's all there is to know. I recently started this audiobook about politics because last 2 essays ago or something, there was an essay that described like what politics is, and it's like allyship and alliances based on like who has power and which direction you want the power to flow and like all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I totally get it. I totally understand that. I wish I had more of an understanding of like what politics is outside of like what I've learned from Marilyn Frye. So I asked a friend of mine who knows about these things. I was like, what's like a book I can read that's like politics for dummies, like political, not like state government, but like the concept of politics. And she was like, listen to this, read this book. And then I found it on Audible, and I was like, the guy has a good accent, the narrator, so I was like, great, this is like the book. I can listen to it like in little dribbles at a time. It's just called The Politics Book, and it covers like something insane, like 48 political theorists, and like it kind of is like something you would use for a university class, I think, because it's like it gives you like a kind of like synopsis of their life and their influence, and then it gives you like a little like bullet points of their like what people associate with that person. And dude, this book is driving me up the fucking wall because I'm like 2 hours into it. I think it's like 20 hours something, which to me would justify the cost of the book. And also I was like, that's good because it starts with like Confucianism and goes up to like postmodernism or whatever. So I'm like, that's, it's good like overview of things. And I'm like 2 hours into the books, like we're just getting past the classics like Greek and like Plato and all that crap. And part of it is they already know a fair amount about classical politics, I guess. But this book is making me fucking murderous because literally the entire fucking book so far, a man was saying how fathers should be fathers, how kings should be kings, how brothers should treat their fellow brothers. Oh, this philosopher, this is what he has to say about how men should treat the other men in the army. This philosopher, like literally, it's like to the exclusion of women. The only reference to women, I think, in the first 2 hours of this fucking book, literally was like some Chinese philosopher was talking about how like acting in a righteous way like gets people to treat you in a righteous way or something. And so he basically was like the family needs to be treated right, and I think that they used the word mother once in that paragraph. And then is it Aristotle? I think Aristotle, who was like everybody deserves respect and should have like a say in governance, except obviously like foreigners, slaves, animals, and women, because they're all like on the same level. And so far, that's the only mention of women in the whole fucking book for the first two. And I was like, I don't know, man, it's driving me up the fucking wall. So, not to blather on about this very phallocratic book, which like obviously was inevitable. I knew it was inevitable, but I kind of just wanted to like expand my like ways of thinking about politics. Maybe I chose the wrong book. Maybe I'm not far enough into the book. Maybe it's inevitable because everybody who's talked about politics before the last like 50 years has been like a man, but like it's just. So when I was reading this and it was like some dude saw one elephant, it was like, I know the truth. I was like, yeah, that's how I feel about the book I'm like listening to. Okay, so because also I was trying to read this like other book. The next 4 essays in this book are like reviews where she's like, I read this thing, this is what I think about the thing. And I, being the way I am, I was like, I will read the thing before I read the review of the thing. So I have like context. Then I realized that each of them was an entire fucking book. And I was like, am I going to read 4 entire nonfiction books before like next week? Like, no, I will not. But I did try to read one of them, and it's like what's the book called? Alison Jaeger's Feminist Politics and Human Nature. It's kind of like each essay in the book confronts like a different form of like philosophical theory, and then like an analysis of how feminism does or doesn't fit into it, which is interesting to me, and I like that. I might actually read it on the channel eventually. But I basically started reading that and I was like, I'm too dumb to have opinions about this because I don't have enough like background information about politics in general before I get to like this. But anyway, right. Yeah, it's the first couple pages of this essay. She talks about the, what's this called? I forget what the doctrine of whatever it is, but like the intelligibility of the universe, which is like most classical philosophy takes into account, basically that like we, because we're humans and we're trying to find out about humans, it's possible for us to know about ourselves. They're like, the information is out there and we can understand it. They're like, knowledge is knowable, right? I think that most people take that default position when it comes to like knowledge of the world and the way things work. And if you're a woman and you take that default position of things are knowable, because I'm a person who lives in a society of people, so I can know about the things in the society of the people, you're kind of fucked. Because what is taken as truth and fact is the arrogant assumptions of men, or the desires of men, or the observations of men. And so this is kind of like a metaphysical gaslighting that most women live under. So the first couple of pages basically talk about the women talking to each other and realizing they have shared experiences that they have been told, A, don't exist, like explicitly, or B, you're crazy if you think that exists, because men are in power, telling us, like, whenever I'm reading her stuff and it's like, you know, more philosophical, I cannot get the historical context out of my mind. I'm like, in what year were women allowed to start going to like school in like any given country? Like, for so much of history, the only women who actually could like read and write to the same degree as men who were like reading and writing books were like nuns or something. Like, it was like a very small number of women in the world could even read and write. So they wouldn't even been able to like, that would limit their communication when they were all basically housebound, you know, or like limit our ability to know what they were talking about because they weren't recording it. Like, so much of this, she's like, women had to get together to talk to each other face to face to realize the thing that they were experiencing was not some crazy thing that made them defective. It actually was a shared experience among them that they were told didn't exist. And so like this brings me to like the historical context where she's like, at one point she's like, I think we're on the way. I think it's towards the end of the essay. She's like, I think we're on the way to writing the book of like the world according to women. But like we're just in the first couple steps and I can't imagine where the book is going to end. She says something like that. And I'm like, how long has the human species been writing stuff down? Because I agree with her that we're just starting in that. And I really think it's only since like the when's Mary Wollstonecraft? Like, I really only think it's like the last 150, 200 years that women have started writing stuff down, and they were like far and few between, and we only know really about the ones who were taken as like somewhat legitimate and like published and like, you know, like it's just depressing, I guess is my point. So yeah, she's like, we need to take ourselves seriously, we need to take each other seriously, and we need to like put work into this, which I totally agree with. I love a lot of the language she uses here, the sense data, body data, the compelling cogency. There was a couple of times where there was like one phrase that it was like generalizing the generality or something. I was like, what the fuck? Like, I understood what she was saying, but I was like, it's like a tongue twister. Yeah. So she talks about like pattern recognition and how it can be like confusing or lead us to the wrong place or can kind of fall apart. And she says it's not that it doesn't have merit because it can fall apart, or it's not that it doesn't have like a rigorous process because it doesn't always lead us to the same place. Because she basically, as what I got from this was like, anytime you try to talk about a pattern, you're talking about it with different women. And every time you talk about it with different women, you're going to get a different answer. So the variability is the women involved, not the pattern is observed. So if you take into account that every time you bring up a question, there's a variability in who's answering, then of course you're not always going to get the same answer. And her point is kind of like, because you're not always getting the same answer doesn't mean that the answers are wrong. It just means that the answer is varied and like there's a multitude. So she's not saying that doesn't mean that things have merit, or that doesn't mean we should ignore things or discount things. What that actually means is that we should keep asking the question and keep expanding our understanding of things, and that will lead us to understanding even more patterns. So she's not saying we need to be disciplined in terms of what questions we're asking, or who we're asking the questions of, or where the answers bring us. The thing we need to be disciplined in is like the faith and the spirit of looking for it. At least that's what I got out of this. Because she literally is like, sometimes it seems kind of wishy-washy and seems kind of like non-linear. Like that's not, you don't always start at point A and end at point B. So you might think like what you talked about one day discounts what you talked about the next day, but that's not true. She's like, the thing that you're learning and that you're knowing is more truths about women, and they all kind of coalesce to mean something. What that means, we don't know all the time. But the fact that you're looking for it and accumulating the data, you will start to see the more and more patterns. So I think she basically is like saying, like, if you follow like a kind of feminist faith, if you have like faith in the connections between the women, and you have faith in the process, then you will always learn something. Whether that's the thing you're looking for or not, whether that's confirms something you already think you know or not, whether that leads you to question and challenge things you thought you knew for sure. The fact that you're following the process, you're learning more, that is like the point of the thing. And so there is a discipline to it, and that discipline is to like keep doing it. As far as I understood the essay, maybe some of you disagree with me. Okay. Oh, then she talks about how how we need to be careful. And this is something that I totally this makes me think so much about postmodernism. And it actually started making me thinking about like the kind of like high control group behavior that we see among like trans extremist communities, right? She's like, we need to be careful not to become super generalized to the point where we're like flattening out all differences and all varieties of experiences. And we need to be careful that we also don't go to the other end and become hyper individualistic, right? So she's like, we need to be like thread the needle and stick in the middle, recognizing the individuality and how the differences that brings to the table, and recognizing like the things that draw us together and our commonalities. She's like, we need to like balance both. When I think about postmodernism and queer theory and the expected behaviors and thoughts of people who are in like high control group settings that are in like the queer community, there's this like wild disparity that it's like, okay, everybody in the group is wildly oppressed. At the same time, my experience is so individualistic that nobody else can really understand what I'm going through except me. Like, we are all in the same situation, but my situation is so specific, I don't even have like real language to describe it that anybody can understand it in. Like, there's just like wild back and forth, and you're never anywhere in the middle. There's never like all people of X group experience this. Here's a varieties of that within this. It's always like this wild back and forth. So that to me is like really important to notice, because it stops you from like it's crazy. Like, you could be in a group that is like 95% female, and because they're encouraged to think of things hyper individualistically, they cannot tell you a single thing they all have in common. Or you can be in a group that is like every single person in that group is like a different race, a different class, a different ethnicity, a different background, right? And they're all like, oh no, we're the exact same. There's no differences between us because we're all queer, or like whatever. We're all whatever the thing is, pan or something. Like, so it like completely prevents any real like conversation, any real thinking. It forces everything to just be like as extreme as possible to conform to the like we're all individuals, or to conform to the we are all the exact same collective. Yeah, waterbender, is that a reference to Avatar? Have you seen the live action yet? I haven't watched it. Says trans stuff is always self-contradicting. Yeah, but it's like it's meant to be contradictory at this point. Like it's like it's not a bug. It's a what do you call a feature. Like if you're constantly going from one extreme to the other to prove that you are in the group and yet you're interesting at the same time, you can never sit down and say like this is the things we all have in common and how did we get here and what does that mean and what are the patterns that lead us to understand this. Like you can't do any actual like self-actualizing. I haven't dressed up as a waterbender, but I've dressed up as an airbender. Like I shaved my head all the way down. I like painted the arrows and stuff. And my cat is named after Momo, like from Avatar. She makes like the noise. Okay. So I appreciated her nuance, basically, where she was like, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. When she kept using the term epistemic community, she meant like in terms of epistemology, right? But it sounded like I was saying like something to do with like, I don't know. I kept thinking of the word pandemic or something, and I was like, I hope nobody's like misinterpreting this. Okay. This is something that she brings up in some of her older essays. There's one essay where she talks about like men not being able to like perceive women's experiences and emotions as real because they're so fucking arrogant and self-centered and egotistical. And she's like, the way we can learn about this is by looking for like the things that men don't say or the things that men can't hear, or like she basically is pointing out like by looking in like negative space we can learn about things. So here she's pointing out in like the consciousness raising thing where she's like, sometimes we'll look for patterns and we won't find the pattern, or sometimes we'll look for connections and we'll find the connections but they lead us to a different place than we expected to go. And so she's like, that's not a bad thing, that's not like counter to our goal. Learning the opposite, or learning that the pattern doesn't exist, or learning that the pattern exists in a different place. So basically is like the negative is just important as the positive when you're looking for an answer. I like appreciated that she brought that up. I think that's something that I haven't seen a lot of feminists talk about. There's this one phrase here. She says, discovering patterns requires novel acts of attention. And I think that that's like another reason I hate social media, because like social media doesn't actually make you pay attention. It makes you just like look for confirmation, basically. And that's not making you like focus and observe and connect. Like I always feel like whenever I start reading feminist nonfiction, I start like making all these connections, like things in my life, things I've seen online, things other women have said to me, things I've read, other things I've read. Like I make all these connections and I'm like, oh my gosh, like my brain is so powerful. Women's writings are so like enlightening. I'm like, everything like makes more sense to me than ever before, blah, blah, blah. Then I go through a phase of like not reading women's writings, not reading feminism, spending all my time on social media. And I get into this kind of like intellectual rut where I'm just like seeing people that I'm like agree, disagree, agree, disagree. And I'm like, that's not actually like an act of attention, an act of observation. That's like an inaction. Like you're turning your brain off when you do that. I think it's like harmful. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is more particular what I was talking about a minute ago. She's like, if you're checking to see if something fits and it doesn't fit, that's just like that's the negative information where it's just like disproving it is also information. Okay. this also, okay, so she talks in this like middle section, she talks about no, I really need to end this. She talks in the middle section about how, you know, one woman would say like a general statement about how women are economically disadvantaged by men. And then one woman would pop up and say, "Oh no, but like I'm not economically disadvantaged by men, so that's not a pattern that can prove true to all women." And this to me is like one of the fundamental pillars of liberal feminism, because like let's talk about religion a little bit. You have all of these like social justice people who are like, Islam is like a religion of women, for women, or whatever. This applies to like all religions, in my opinion. Like it's a religion that's like for peace, for women, for women's empowerment. And they're like, right, because I live in like Montreal and my parents are like secular Muslims, and like I choose to follow XYZ of the Quran and to disregard XYZ of the Quran. And I live in a country where like I have the right to do like a lot of stuff because we're in Canada. And that's why Islam is great for women. And it's like, so you've taken the general pattern of like Muslim countries beating women to death in the streets for like showing their fucking ankle or whatever, and you've said, nope, none of that's true because this one woman had this one experience. And that to me is like liberal feminism, aka anti-feminism, in like a, that's what it is. It's like disregarding the collective oppression of women because one woman had her own bank account. Like I think of, there's all this like historical revisionism going on with like history where they'll be like, well, you know, like most women chose to only be like maids or to only do laundry or to only be seamstresses or whatever back in like 1400s Bavaria or something. But there was one woman who like her husband like left his business to her when he died. So like she was a landowner or like some insane bullshit, and they'll be like, therefore in that time period women had independence. And it's like, no, they fucking did not. Like someone like Anne Lister, like you can't look at the time period that she lived in. Like the reason we know about her was because she was an anomaly, right? Because she was like remarkable for doing what she did. She did like a male's job of like being like running the estate that she was like her family had, right? And then to be like, well, women, they could do that stuff. And it's like, that's what liberal feminism is. It's like, it's taking the exception and saying because the exception exists, there is no pattern to women's oppression. It makes me insane. Ali says the lack of critical thought is a real problem as I get older. I don't have the energy for it. I agree, Benji. It's harmful. Yeah, because also not only is it like turn your brain off, it also leads to like divisiveness. And I'm not here to like spout off about inclusion and whatever, but if the strength women has is based in our connections to each other, creating more and more and more divisions is like fucking doing men's work for them. Like in one of in one of Marilyn Frye's earlier essays, she is like, patriarchy, not like men, but patriarchy is smart because they figured out how to make us do their work for them. We don't need to have like an individual man force us to do things that will enable patriarchy to keep working the way it does. There doesn't need to be an individual man who's like, here's a list of the things we need to do to make sure that women don't hurt us in our established power. The women will just do all that shit for them. And like when I see all these women online getting into these like huge fights and taking sides and like doxing each other and like leaving projects they're a part of and all this crap, it's like I'm not trying to say that like women are responsible for patriarchy. I'm just saying, like, who do you think that is benefiting? Is it women generally or it's men? Like, yeah. Okay. What time is it? Okay. Oh, so she says, this is another thing where she's like, we should be disciplined rather than like just being open and receptive, is about scope. I really love the metaphor of the metaphor, where she's like, you could take a metaphor like the world's a stage, and it makes sense because it's open-ended and like open to interpretation. So like to you it would mean one thing, and to me it would mean a different thing. And we all kind of get what it means without it having to be explained to us. But if you try to take it to the extreme, right, it doesn't make any sense anymore. So she's like, that's how pattern recognition works. You, when it comes to like women's oppression and feminism, you take the pattern at face value, you see where it applies, you stretch it, you see where it no longer applies. Then that's where you get, that's the edge of your scope. And that we need to be like aware of that. I think that a lot of that has led to like modern anti-feminism, aka liberal feminism, because the complete lack of critical thought, and that combined with like the dearth of honest woman to woman communication has made it so that you can take a feminist concept and go to such extremes that it makes no fucking sense whatsoever and is in fact anti-feminist. Like a feminist concept is like sexual shame is bad, right? Well, if you take it to a really extreme, you can become like Judith Butler and you're like now saying that pedophilia is great or something. Like, you know, you need to have self-awareness. You need to have women around you to like challenge you and disprove things. You need to have like critical thinking. If you don't have those things, then any feminist concept can be taken to an extreme that makes no fucking sense and is actually anti-feminist. So I appreciated the way she described that. That was good. Okay, we're going to close up with one last thing. So she's like, imagine a woman. Bye. She's like, imagine a woman who is now in a position to speak with authority. Well, the only person that she's heard speak with authority is a man. I think that the specific example she uses is like her father. So she's like, now this woman is going to try to use the voice of her father to speak. And she basically is like, how are you destroying the message and distorting your way of thinking to the point where you now have the authority to express something, but you will not be able to understand the thing you're trying to express because you're trying to do it from like the male perspective. Basically was her point, is what I understood. Maybe you would disagree with me, but I think that was like super salient to me because I don't know, I just have like so many thoughts about this voice concept. I think at the end of the day, all of this leads back to like the spirit and goodwill of the thing. If you are a woman who respects other women and respects the work that other women are doing, you should extend the goodwill to them to listen to what they have to say, even if they're not presenting it in the voice of what you consider to be like the authoritative voice. The problem is obviously that most women are male identified and have a male value system, and therefore, if a woman is not presenting things in a way that is like male sanctioned, the average woman would view that as something with less legitimacy. Yeah. Reading that, I was wondering about myself. I've gotten pretty comfortable with my way of speaking and my kind of like circular conversations I have on YouTube, where it's like kind of meandering. I feel pretty confident in my vocabulary and my ability to articulate my thoughts at this point. I've gotten very comfortable with like saying like, wait, stop, I'm going to restart this sentence. Or what I've just said before, I'm going to rephrase it in a different way. And even with saying, maybe my interpretation is wrong, but this is what I understood it to be. I think I've gotten pretty good at confidently communicating what I have to say in a way that doesn't replicate a man with an arrogant ego stating the world as he views it. I'm not sure how much my female socialization plays in to where I've ended up. Like, it could be that I'm being too humble and too I'm not sure what word to use. Like, I have some friends who I think are like the smartest women I've ever met in my life. And I'll ask them about something that they've like studied for like a decade, and they'll be like, "Oh, I don't really know if I like have an opinion on that." Like, I'm like, or I don't know if my opinion is like informed. And I'm like, dude, you are like the informed opinion. What the fuck are you talking about? Um, so I don't know if the way that I communicate in like feminist online spaces like here right now is me trying to be like communicate as a woman to woman, or if it's me falling into like some kind of female socialization. I don't know. But I've definitely made an intentional shift over the last 3 years to be more confident in myself and to communicate better without trying to be like rigorous and arrogant or something. So, I don't know. It just made me think. I don't really know what the answer to any of that is or what the conclusion to any of that is, but this last thought of like communicating with authority as a woman without replicating the persona of a man, like what is that and how do you do that? And what is the impact when you do try to replicate the authority of a man now that you have authority? I don't know, just made me think. All right, so 99% sure I'm going to see you guys tomorrow for the next essay. The next essay is... Oh, we're in the review section now. The Contest of Feminisms. So this is the response to the Feminist Politics and Human Nature by Alison Yeager. Yeah. I'm very excited about that. As I said, I wanted to read the entire book before I got to this, but then the book was like 300 pages long, and I was like, who has the time? Because like we're on a schedule. I don't have the time. So, yeah. I'm excited for that. That's going to happen tomorrow, and then we'll do the discussion. Tomorrow, I'm looking at my schedule for tomorrow. Tomorrow I don't have my other job at 4, so we can be a little more relaxed with how long this goes. Possible person says, makes me think I sort of replicate men when I talk. Yeah, but it's like, I don't know. That's such a complicated discussion to have, because are you replicating men intentionally, or are you not replicating female like intonation when you speak? You see what I mean? Like it's very complicated. Like chicken before the egg. We don't live in a vacuum, etc. I don't know. So yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Unless my job asks me to stay late, which I think there's a possibility that might happen tomorrow. In which case I'll just put in the live chat like, hey, I'm not coming. I'll put on Twitter like, hey, I'm not coming, and then we'll push back a day, or push it back to later in the day, maybe. But I'm 99% sure I'll be here tomorrow to read that essay. Oh, just a reminder also. Next week I'm going to be out of town, so I'm not streaming. So I'm doing 3 streams this week and 3 streams the week after, and no streams next week. And then I'll probably go back to doing 2 streams a week, depending on my work schedule. Okay. So as always, thank you very much for being here. Also, now that I'm going away for a week, I don't have the time to do my live reacts, but I've actually found a bunch of like stuff in the last couple days that I really want to do live reacts to. We'll see when I have time for that. I think we basically have enough topics to cover from now until like the end of April or something, if we do like 1 a week. So we'll see. As always, though, you can email me with new topics you want me to cover in the live reacts. All right. Thanks so much, Ali, Waterbender, Blood Moon, Useless Strawberry, Cyber, Possible Person, as always. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.